Hey guys, what's up? It's Alex here. Welcome back to another video and possibly the last episode of the Abandoned F1 track series. It's all down to whether you guys can think of any more and whether you want to see this series continue. But anyway, 4 more awesome tracks to talk about in this video, and let's go ahead and do it right now. We'll start off with the Aintree Racing Circuit, which still actually holds races today, or still has a track today. It's not completely abandoned, but parts of the track have been since it last held a Formula 1 race. The 3-mile track was based in Aintree, quite near Liverpool. It was known as the Goodwood of the North, and it held a British Grand Prix in 1955, 1957, 1959, 1961 and 1962. It had a huge crowd, and actually at the 1957 European Grand Prix, which was held at Aintree, there was a crowd of 150,000 people. The Grand Prix track record was held by Jim Clark with a 1:55 in his Lotus 25 Climax in 1962. There's still a 1.5 smaller version of the track which is there today. I think there's either small race events there or maybe just track days which are held there, but there are somewhat events going on at the track which is cool to see. Even though the sort of larger Formula 1 track has been abandoned, there is still a smaller track there which is holding some events, which is awesome to see. It's never nice to see a track get sort of kicked off a calendar in a way, but it's nice to see this track actually did held quite a few British Grand Prix, and obviously Jim Clark having a lap record is never going to be a bad thing for the track's history. But at the end of the day, it's one of the sort of tracks that just didn't really work out with Formula 1, and obviously with the adaptations of Formula 1 going through new rule changes and sometimes cars getting faster and faster and faster, some tracks like Aintree just didn't really work out, and that's the reasons, I guess you say, why it didn't really continue on the calendar. It didn't really suit the modern day Formula 1 at the time, and decided to sort of get it rid of the calendar. But at the end of the day, it was still a track which many people loved. Of course, held quite a few Grand Prix as well, so a lot of people, especially of that era, will be fond of this track and will be sad to have seen it not continue on further. But you know, where it doesn't really suit the modern day Formula of the time, I guess it's probably best to adapt and evolve. Go to Brands Hatch all the time. Just go to Brands Hatch 2019, go to Brands Hatch Formula 1. So next up we have the Prince George Race Circuit in South Africa. Yes, it's a slightly weird name for a racetrack, but this was actually a track that did hold a Grand Prix back in the day. Based in East London in the Eastern Cape Province, it held a Grand Prix in 1934, 1936 and 1939. Racing was then stopped after the 1939 Grand Prix because of the Second World War, quite understandably. The original track was 23.4 kilometres long, and the track was shortened to 17.7 kilometres long in 1936. Still, this is a very, very long track, and I guess looking back at a lot of these tracks which you've seen in this series, a lot of them do seem to be an absurd length in comparison to modern day Formula 1 tracks, which are like 6 to 7 kilometres long, some of them even shorter than that. Racing continued in 1960, and the track was modified to comply with the current Formula 1 regulations. At the time, the track was only 3.9 kilometres long, and the racing continued there until 1966. However, after 1966, many of the fans and the drivers and just generally everyone in Formula 1 said this was a track that was too small for Formula 1 cars. It didn't really suit the modern day Formula 1 car. The cars were getting quicker and sort of outgrowing the track in a way. And the South African Grand Prix since went to Kyalami, and then we've already talked about Kyalami and what happened to that. That went to be on abandoned and then came back and possibly could be back on the F1 calendar. At some point, it's now got, I think, a Class A licence, so we possibly could see Kyalami in a South African Grand Prix back at some point. I guess it's always quite interesting to see how tracks suited some sort of eras. I think one of my favourite tracks, Brands Hatch, it suited an era of Formula 1, and it would definitely not suit a modern day, era of Formula 1. If you tried to put a 2018 Formula 1 car around Brands Hatch, it just wouldn't work. Some parts of the track are literally one car wide, and that's just the way Formula 1 is. It sort of got bigger and bigger and bigger, like wider, fatter, longer, faster, like literally at the same, it just didn't work. Some tracks don't work in certain generations of Formula 1, and they saw this with this, was it Prince George Race Circuit? They saw that Formula 1 was outgrowing the track, and they thought, let's just not push it too much. Let's just go to a different track which suits the era of Formula 1. And Kyalami at the time, even though it was dangerous, which we've talked about in the past, it was a track that at least suited that sort of style of car. So that was good. It was interesting to see. And yeah, but once again, it's nice to see different tracks on the calendar. There's some tracks which have just literally held a Grand Prix from the start of Formula 1 right to the end. I mean, Monaco, Monza, for example, Italian and Monaco Grand Prix they're pretty much always held there, especially Monaco. But I do like to see a bit of variation now and again. It sort of, in a way, adds a bit more history to your country's sort of F1 history of its different tracks. It's sort of the evolution in a way. I don't know. Can you argue that or not? I don't really know. But Monaco and Monza maybe were two bad examples because they were very historic tracks, and maybe they worked because they were always suitable from day one. Or maybe Monaco's case were never suitable since day one. So next up is a track which I probably can't really pronounce properly. So if there's any Spanish people that are watching this, please let me know in the comment section down below. But I'm going to say this with an English accent and just hope it somewhat comes out okay. So this is like the Montjuic circuit in Spain. It was a street track based in Spain near Barcelona. Basically, it's a track I can't pronounce, so let's try and move on from that point. Oh no, I've even put it in the next part of the sentence as well. I can't even continue. Basically, this track was held in the Montjuic Mountains in Barcelona. The track was both a motorcycle and Formula 1 Grand Prix venue. The last Grand Prix was actually showered here in controversy and tragedy, unfortunately. A car went off the track and actually killed some spectators, 5 spectators, and that was on lap 25 of the race. And sadly, many people have been saying this, many drivers have been saying this for quite a few times, that they believed this track was way too dangerous for Formula 1 and they believed that they should stop racing there, but unfortunately they didn't quite listen, and unfortunately that means there was an accident which killed some spectators, which is a horrible, horrible thing. And after this tragedy, the race was ended right there and then, and F1 never returned to the track. However, it has since held a 24-hour motorcycle race and also held some sort of small classic events where sort of like, I guess you'd say like classic meetups of the cars, not really any sort of racing. I think there may be somewhat high hill climbs, but nothing as proper as a motorcycle race, or nothing quite as proper as a Formula 1 race. The reason why I feel like this might be like the last or at least penultimate episode of this series is because a lot of the tracks left Formula 1 for the same reason, was that they were way too dangerous, and that was the same case here as well. I'm not going to try and pronounce it once again, but you know what I mean. This track was way too dangerous for Formula 1. Based on a mountain, it's always going to be pretty dangerous, I'm not going to lie. So yeah, it's really, really sad. It's a big tragedy that when anyone loses their lives, especially when a driver goes off the track and kills fans watching the track, which are there because they love the sport, never nice to hear. And of course that's sort of one of the big things that triggered motorsport racing to sort of slow down there, and obviously F1 to completely stop there. And understandable why they decided to get it off the calendar. I mean, it wasn't really a purpose-built racetrack in that way. Obviously in a mountain it's going to be very hard to put in the facilities of something like, just put it, Barcelona, Catalonia, the track, the modern day Formula 1, it's obviously very hard to implement those facilities on a mountain. It's always going to be very, very hard. So I can understand it was probably taken off the calendar for the right reasons. Definitely taken off the calendar for the right reason, I should say. And yeah, understandably, we shouldn't go back there. So last one in this video is going to be an American track, and that is the Riverside International Raceway. This track is a Grand Prix circuit which held a Grand Prix event in 1958 and 1960. Chuck Dayan won the 1958 race, which is an unofficial race, and the 1960 race was won by Sterling Moss. As the only official race in 1960 was not any better received than any of the previous year's events in other tracks, they decided to go not back to Riverside because they thought it wasn't a particularly great event, and considering maybe all the effort they'd put into it. But with a lot of these old tracks, it was very dangerous, and a lot of drivers didn't appreciate that. They just kept saying, let's stop racing here, this isn't really a proper venue, so why are we still racing here? But sort of, from the pictures I've seen, it's sort of based somewhat in the desert, and it doesn't look like it's a very safe track in a lot of ways. The track would go on to hold some other big events, I think sports car racing, endurance racing, but most notably, I guess you'd say for American fans at least, would be the NASCAR races that went there, and I think in the 70s and the 80s. But once NASCAR left, the track really did struggle to hold any more sort of big events of that stature once again. And Formula 1 leaving, NASCAR leaving, I think that's only sort of setting a tone of why maybe other other race series shouldn't really be going there. Now, I kind of found it kind of strange researching this track because I can't really understand how this track still stands today as a racetrack. It looks completely abandoned from the pictures and all that. I can't really find a modern day picture of the track in a way, but the logo's quite, you know, up to date. It looks pretty professional, it looks pretty modern, but I just can't really find any modern pictures of the track. I don't know whether I'm just being silly or not, but no big events really go there anymore. I think it By the look of it, it could just be like a track days track where people just turn up in their own cars and go around, blast around in their own cars, which is a bit more understandable than racing a Formula 1 car around there. It doesn't really like a track which could hold a Formula 1 Grand Prix ever, let alone a one day Formula 1 track. And I can understand why NASCAR would have gone there, but it's sort of like a road track which didn't really work out either for them. So there we go, another track which didn't really make it in Formula 1, didn't really make it in other series, and then was sort of pushed aside and didn't really ever hold anything of that stature again. So there we go, that's pretty much it, guys. Thanks for watching this video. Let me know if you enjoyed it. Let me know if you want to see more of these in the future or not. I don't want to just keep doing the same video basically over and over again. I feel like we're in the 5th episode of this right now, so I don't want to be too repetitive. But unless you want me to do like a final big hurrah in a way of this series, if you've got any other ones I haven't really talked about, please leave it in the comment section down there. That's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Please remember to drop a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. It's been Axe and I'm out here. Goodbye.